any time, Alison, I can give you the names of some of the lessons that he does in that that are demanding of that internal.
Yeah, well, I've done
And that's the last lesson that he teaches, so it's interesting, isn't it? You know?
And it gets really cross.
Absolutely. What are you doing? No. So, you know, some of the times he's getting cross, I can understand it, you know? And as I said to you the other day, the thing I love about him is he's Feldenkrais. He's not trying to be anyone else, you know? Yeah. He's a man of his culture too. You know, he came from that, you know, Jewish culture. What do? They ask questions. They argue. They... Absolutely. And we're, you know, to realise that we're as much product of our culture. Okay, so we're going to be rolling like a baby this morning. So first of all, we need to get the shape of a baby. So start with your legs long. So how do we come back to that place? So if you were going to begin to bring one of your legs, take it out to the side, so your knees bending sideways, a little bit like he was talking yesterday with the elbows bending sideways a little bit. And you're going to begin to just keep letting that knee come up until it's over your chest. And can you find a way to do this without evoking your back muscles? Because babies haven't got extensors yet. So how do you let the weight roll? How do you let the movement go through you? Where might your head go? So there's no great intentionality in this. You're going in a direction. And then you find a way to bring the other leg up over your chest. And really see if you can find that place that if you've done it more like a baby, that what you'd find is that your knees will be wide and your feet will be closer together. So if you look at a little baby when it's lying on its back, its knees are wide, its feet are really quite close together. And feel the difference with your knee, with your legs in that position. What happens to your contact with the ground when your knees are wide above your chest and your feet are together, compared to if you bring your knees and your feet more in line with each other? Or if you even bring them really close together. What happens? What's the difference in the sense of width in yourself, the parts of you that are contacting the ground, when you can get into this baby position of your knees wide and your feet closer together? And again, there's very few of us, probably as adults, who that would be our resting position. See if you could just find that there. And then could you begin to bring your arms into the same sort of orientation? So they're lifted into the air, your elbows are wide. Your elbows are wide and your hands are more together. Maybe somewhere near your face. So just feel, what does that position afford you when you've got your knees and elbows wider and your feet and hands more closer to the midline? Can you see how For many of us, it helps to change the contact in our back. Gives us more width, which is going to make rolling easier. That's what we were talking about much earlier in the week. This ability to begin to roll. So keeping your knees wide and your elbows wide, just gently begin to roll a little to the right and a little to the left, and just see how far can you go. So your arms are in the air, if you can, if they can be supported above you. So your elbows are higher than your hands and your knees are higher than your feet. Elbows are higher than your hands and knees are higher than your feet. Sorry, yes. Just see, how would you roll? What would be your strategy? How easy would it be? How much of you is involved in the rolling? And again, you might want to feel what's the difference if my knees and elbows are closer together and my hands and feet are more in line with my knees and elbows. Well, how does that influence your ability to roll? So we're really just investigating, how does the position of our limbs influence our contact with the ground and our ability to shift our weight? You just fall. And can you feel it's because you've lost some of the width in your back when you're closer together? Because you're adults, you've already learned how to get up in the air. So as I said, we're really going back to rolling like a baby. Okay, pause for a moment, have a rest. So I think, you know, Feldenkrais had this extraordinary ability to, as he was talking about, you read in The Elusive Obvious, that he was always interested in process. It was always about the feel of the movement, the sense of the movement, paying attention to the how of the movement. I think he also had an extraordinary ability to really be interested in something. So his ability to observe babies, he spent a long, long time on really understanding how it is that babies learn to come up into the world. And I think that's where, and you know, he was talking yesterday about the child that he worked with, and the child had been to the Bow Baths. So there's a Bow Bath. They worked a lot with people with neurological deficits. And Vodja, the guy he was talking about from Prague, also had lots of ideas about working with it. So it's what was Feldenkrais doing that was different? What did he understand about learning? And what did he understand about going with what the person can do? So come back to that same position, really feeling as much as you can that your back muscles can stay soft, to bring your arms and legs above your torso. So your knees are wide, your elbows are wide. They're in the air though, your elbows are up in the air. And very gently begin to feel that you could begin to direct both elbows toward both knees. So both elbows to both knees. So you're going to have to do a little bit of rounding here. Gently feel the parts of your back that you roll over. Head, if it's possible, can stay on the ground, if it can. So that you're having to find a little bit more in your upper chest. And really notice what moves more through space. Keep your head down if you can. Okay? Yeah. Come on. No, you're doing it. No, no. Let your head just go back. Let it go. Let it go. Let your chin go on. Let your head drop back. Back up there. Yeah. So your head doesn't have to go with this. So you're just gently bringing elbows and knees a little closer together. You're not taking and then taking them back to rest. And notice, do your elbows make a bigger trajectory or do your knees make a bigger trajectory? So maybe you could play around with that a little bit in that very global, soft way. What's the difference if my elbows do a little bit more than my knees? Or my knees do a little bit more than my elbows? Just to find what's your habit, which part of you can round more easily. Is it your top half or your bottom half? Just allowing your head to drop back. So your neck has to be soft, so your chin will go a little bit up toward the ceiling. So you can really feel the curve of your neck responding to this ability of bringing your elbows and knees together. So that your chin drops back, your neck begins to extend a little bit. Can you find that softness, that to allow my back to roll and to lengthen, I need to change something in my neck. And to do that, your eyes can't be fixed on what you're doing. So if you're using your eyes to direct your elbows and knees together, it's very difficult to allow your head to soften, your neck to soften. So we're really wanting you to just get in sensation here. Soft, soft intention, and your eyes are soft. And pause, have a rest. So how do we find this softness in your eyes? Maybe for some of you it helps to think of the telescope. But that you're not looking to see anything in detail. That it is really interesting study, and please don't ask me for the details because I don't have them, but up in northwest Australia, because they were trying to look at some of the things that Aboriginal children did differently to the normal population in how they attended to things, how they made sense of things. And one of the tasks they gave them was that they put out a tray of objects, and I can't remember, say there were 10 objects on the tray, and then they took the tray away and took the objects off, brought the tray back and asked the children to put the objects back where in the relationships they'd been to on the tray, who do you think did better? Yeah, absolutely, the Indigenous kids. And you know, because one of the things that many of us do is that when we're attending to something, and it's a great way of attending, but it's only one way of attending, is that we look at the object and then we look at the next object and we organise its relationship. Whereas what they found is these kids just looked at the big global picture. So they were in peripheral, much more peripheral vision and simply looking for relationships. And that's when Feldenkrais talks about how do we find this attention where one thing isn't more important than another? How do we develop this ability to attend to something where one thing doesn't have to be really foreground? It's a really important thing to develop in our attention, the ability to bring something foreground, to put more narrow focus on it. Helps us not to get distracted. But it's also very important to have this more global attention. And just to be able to scan, look for relationships. And it's a way of using ourselves. It's an organisation that allows this. So bring your arms and legs up again above your torso. And this time, begin to bring or direct your right knee towards your right elbow, bringing them a little closer and then let them go back to where they were. So your right knee goes towards your right elbow and then it goes back. And how do you do this? Again, really play with the difference between your knees and elbows being wide, because many of you have already crept back to your knees being closer together, which you've learned from standing for many years. And just see, what does it afford? What opportunities does it give you to sense yourself when you can really let your knees stay wide? And where does your weight shift to? What does your head do now? And again, as much as you can, try to leave out of it any seeing at the moment. What was that? Try to leave out any looking or seeing, that you can sort of have that global, oh yeah, there's the world over me, over there to the right, but I'm not looking for any detail. My eyes aren't fixing anywhere. And how does your left side respond to that? What does your left side do? When you direct your right elbow and your right knee toward each other, what does your left elbow and your left knee do? Could they go apart a little bit? So could you allow them to do the opposite movement? So that as your right elbow and knee come together, your left elbow and knee move apart. And then could you do the same with your left elbow and left knee? Again, being in that global, open, easy place where nothing's standing out in particular. Your attention's just moving around. And is this different to the other side? Does your head do something different to this side? Does it respond in a different way? What does your right side do? And just taking them together and taking them apart. And maybe part of your exploration is that each time I do this, I do it in a slightly different way. So I find a little bit different part of my back goes toward the floor. Or maybe I do a little bit more with my elbow, or I do a little bit more with my knee. Maybe my head moves in a slightly different orientation in relationship to this. So there's no fixity in here. There's no just repeating the same thing over and over. And is there something about finding this more global attention, this more global sense that allows many of us to put more variation in? That it allows us to look for relationships in a different way, or to sense different relationships. And pause, have a rest again. So how's being a baby influencing your contact with the ground? And as Feldenkrais suggested, a lot of these are not easy for us because we've learnt to move, we've learnt to raise our centre of gravity, to come up into the world. So to go back to some of this, we can tend to very quickly revert to being an adult again in our posture, in our shapes. Okay, up you come again. Is it getting a little easier to... And can you feel that difference when you initiate with the knees going wide? And to really feel, is it easier for you if you do one leg at a time or both legs? And maybe that'll change as the lesson proceeds. And your arms are up. And now could you begin to take your right elbow and your right knee a little bit away from each other? So your right elbow and right knee are going to increase their distance. And how do you track that in a really sort of soft way? That where's the trajectory that they go in? And again, Feldenkrais would be saying at the moment, oh, that's not how babies do it. So feel the difference. If, as you're starting to take them away, that instead of maintaining the same shape in your arm and leg, your right arm and leg, that as you took them away, they lengthened just a little bit. There was something that your knee would maybe straighten a little bit, your hand would straighten a little bit, so your hand's going a little bit more above your head, foot's going down, but go gently. And feel, what's the difference if my arm and leg change their shape when I do this, or if I keep them in the same configuration? Does it change something in your weight? Something in where your head might go? Something in the ease or the quality of the movement? And what are your left, what's the right, sorry, what's your left side doing at the same time? Has it got left out of the picture? So again, how do we cultivate this sort of whole global awareness? And then you can do the same thing on your left. So now you're thinking of directing your left knee and elbow a little bit away from each other. Feeling how your head responds to that. What's happening in your upper neck? Sorry, not in your upper back. In this area where your collarbones are coming into the front of your chest. What's your sternum doing? But again, you're paying attention to these things, but it's soft. It's soft. You're not getting fixated on anything. It's just that you're simply noticing. Ah, that goes there. Ah, what happens there? And again, you might explore, is there a difference between if you keep your left arm and leg in the same configuration, or if you allow them to lengthen a little bit, to change their shape, that there's something in this movement that could maybe help your elbow to want to begin to lengthen, or your knee to begin to lengthen. There's something as they're moving through space that gravity is sort of pulling them in a way to lengthen very softly because they're no longer above your torso. They're no longer supported over the ground. So a baby wouldn't have enough strength initially to hold its arms and legs in a fixed position. And is it easier to lengthen your arm or your leg? And it's not, again, that you're making it lengthen, but that you're feeling it's in response to what you're doing. So where does your weight roll as you take your arm and leg away from each other? Would it roll to your left or your right? What would make sense if you're a little baby? And again, just check again. Can you keep your elbows wide, knees wide? And have a rest again. You see why they need sleep. But I think the beautiful thing is you can also see when babies can find this space, why all of a sudden they're asleep. You know, they're doing something, and it's this quality that then, now I'm asleep. Now I'm asleep. So can you feel there's something in this more global attention that calms our system? When we can soften our intention. Okay, return to the same starting position. Again, really be interested in how you get there. Could you really find a way that your knees are going wide to get your legs above your chest? Is it getting a little easier to find this position in yourself? Is something getting longer in your back? So now with your wide knees and elbows, keeping them the same distance, and this is a little bit what some of you discovered earlier, if you were going to begin to roll to the side, just have them to the side. Yeah, that's the baby. And they were sort of going to keep more the same distance, so they weren't going to change. How would you roll to the side? Doesn't matter, you choose which side. So your knees and elbows are going to stay the same distance. Same distance between them and in sideways relationship. Yeah? So they're not going away from each other. So what would happen if a baby rolled this way? You found it before. Yeah? What happens? You get to a certain point and what happens? You fall over. Huh? What a surprise. How did I get here? And of course, they can't get back. Huh? So see if you can begin to feel that. There's something about when I'm not changing that relationship, that there's a point where I just go, boop, and I fall. And then it's going to be a struggle to get back. So I'm going to cry probably, unless there's something to help me. Okay, come back to the middle again. So this time begin to take your right elbow and right knee away from each other as you roll to the right. How does that influence your ability to roll to the side? How does that influence it when you begin to understand something about this side movement? And what's the other side of you doing at the same time? So if the right elbow and knee is going away from each other, what are the left elbow and knee doing? Yeah? And some of you are getting it, yeah? You just keep rolling over your side, and where do you end up? Where do you end up? Is there a point where your head lifts just a little bit? So there's a point as you keep going over. If you just stay global, if your head stays soft, maybe if you're looking at your right hand a little bit, and I don't mean fixing on your hand, but there's a softness. You're looking a little bit up and to the right. And somehow you come onto your belly with both arms long and both legs long. Both arms long and both legs long. And then how do you get back again? How do you get back again? And you've got there's two different strategies going on. They're both really... So some people get back by rounding themselves, so they take their head forward in space. So they round themselves, the front of their chest comes forward. And some people do the opposite to get back. They take their head backwards in space to get back onto there. Back. Huh? But whatever you do, your head must be free. And your head's only free if your shoulders are soft, your collarbones are soft. So again, a baby wouldn't reach this really long position, but it wouldn't be holding its limbs in a fixed position. The limbs would be responding to this movement. So that when you end up on your back, you're back in the same relationship. So if you find when you get back to your back, your knees have come back together a little bit again and your elbows, do it again and find a little bit more softness. And you can feel your head's ready to lift just a little bit when you come to your belly. Not a lot, but it's freed from the ground. Okay, do you want to explore the opposite side? Going to your left from your starting position. And again, go slow, so your left elbow and left knee are beginning to move away from each other. Head's free. Nothing's fixed in your attention. Soft, fluid. And again, how do you get back on this side? Do you take your head forward once you're on your belly to get you back? So do you take your head forward in space, or do you take your head backward in space to get back? Either way, you're still going to bring your right elbow and knee together to come back. And then there's a point where your left elbow and knee come back together. And it's to do with having the ground to roll over. So you can see how this is really built from some of the lessons we've been doing. And that's sort of what we have to do with adults. As adults, we've sort of got to put a lot of the components back again. And some of you are feeling you can just keep rolling. in one direction. But watch out for your partners. Watch out for the people around you. And it's always one knee and elbow coming together. So there's always this sideways movement. And where does that take our head through space? And begin to sense for some of us that, again, this upper part of our chest, this ability to move our shoulder girdle freely over our ribs, the softness in our collarbones. So it's the softness in our arms that lets some of the big muscles go, that lets more possibilities emerge. So always remember that. Something that's not moving is being held by muscle. You're not aware maybe of how it's being held. So you can imagine if I've got all the big muscles holding my torso, I can't find all those individual little vertebrae in my spine. They're not available because I've still got all the big muscles supporting me in space. Okay, have a rest again. Again, feel, what does this small global attention offer you in terms of your organisation? That you're tracking all of yourself as you're moving through space, as you're constantly changing orientation. Because to move ourselves through space like this, we can't be fixed in our attention. So that's one of the things that you can begin to explore when you are problem solving, or when yesterday you were asked, to find out how a baby lifts its head. How do we keep that? I think Philippa put it beautifully, and my partner Graham taught me a lot about this because he just goes off into this space that is very creative, where my attention is global. It allows things to come in. Allows me to notice if something new has come in. And as I said, it's one way of attention, and we need many ways of attention. So come back to that same position, and you're a little bit more grown up now as a baby. So this time it's the same movement, but you don't have to change your arm and leg movement. So you can now keep your arm and leg in the same flexed relationship that they're in. So what we were doing first of all is a baby, it's responding to gravity, so wherever it goes, its arm starts to sort of lengthen out. So keep the relationship this time. And how does that influence? So you're still doing exactly the same movement. You're still taking one elbow away from one knee, to roll to the side. And how does that bring you onto your belly? So your elbow and knee is still constantly moving away from each other. Constantly moving, constantly moving, constantly moving, constantly moving. The other one's constantly coming closer together. Keep your attention global, all of you moving, all of you involved. And see that this would tend to bring you up onto your elbows with your legs bent. So your head is going to be lifted much higher. Yeah? Because now the arms and legs aren't doing anything, so everything's mobilizing from the middle. Huh? Everything's mobilizing from the middle. Yeah? The limbs aren't directing it as much. So this really important idea of as my middle gets all of these abilities and my arms and legs don't get in the way, but that I've had to have found my arms and legs to get here. Everything constantly moving, your head's looking up and to the right. If you're going to the right, it's looking up, and to the left if you're going to the left. Eyes. So where's your head go? Where's your head going? And feel how it's this movement of the middle that's just mobilizing the head and the limbs. So you can feel your head has to move backwards in space to roll. It can't be rolling forward. Your head's going to go backwards in space. And up you come. Now be aware of those around. So we're all going to roll the same way this time. So let's all go to the right, and we're not going to do a big roll, roll, roll. But what you're going to do is feel which one would you do for speed or power? Which one would you do for speed or power? Would you do the arms and the legs lengthening, or would you do keeping them in the same configuration? So you're all going to the right. You're all going to the right. Don't go too far. You're not going to run into each other, but you're just going to the right and feeling which one would mobilize me more quickly. Would it be leading from my limbs getting longer, or it would be leading from my middle? And feel free to go either direction, just be aware of the people around you. No, it's got nothing to do with your head. It's got to do with whether you're leading from your middle or your limbs. Your head's free. Huh? So this is what we're learning as we gather our organisation, that more and more movement comes from the middle to direct us. No? But if I want finesse, I'm not going to do that, am I? Because then I want everything to be still in my middle, to be able to have very fine skills. So you can imagine if you're doing this, could you write? No? So how do we keep understanding all these different ways of attending? What do we need to understand to get global attention? And how does that underpin then the ability to get this softness and this ability to direct our attention? Okay. Come up to standing. See what this has done to your organisation. And again, did you feel that many of you could come up then without having to lead with your eyes, or you just came up? So what does this do to your sense of yourself when you've been moving in all of these orientations in space? When you've been changing your shape to find contact with the ground, you have to be related to the environment, both to the ground and to the space around you. So what does it do? What does this afford you? And see if you can begin to feel at the moment, if you just gently look down with your head, not so much leading with your eyes, but just taking your head down, how much of your middle is ready to respond? If you're going to go down a little bit to the side, but just with a very soft, how much of your middle is ready to follow your head? Or even that you could feel you could lead the movement from your head. And start to feel, have you ever seen dancers do this? This is not ballet. Have you ever seen all of that beautiful movement where they're just in themselves, they're in the environment, it's not strongly oriented anywhere. It's a different attention, it's a different way of sensing ourselves. And then go for a walk. Maybe think, is this a quality that maybe would be nice to have a little bit more of in my life sometimes? That I didn't have to be so oriented to the task at hand. No? And to know that sometimes I need that. Okay, and we'll have our morning break.